All right, so today we're gonna dive into something I think we can all relate to, procrastination.
Oh, yeah.
Our source for this deep dive is John Perry's The Art of Procrastination.
Okay.
And this book is so witty, it actually won a satirical Nobel Prize.
Wow.
The premise is fascinating. Maybe procrastinating isn't always a bad thing.
Okay.
And it could even make us more productive.
Interesting.
It sounds crazy, but bear with us.
Yeah. I'm intrigued already. What's so fascinating is that Perry, he kind of turns that whole procrastination as a vice idea on its head.
Mm-hmm.
And he argues that procrastinators actually, they do get things done.
Right.
Just not the most urgent ones. Like, we prioritize almost subconsciously based on what feels less daunting at the time.
So it's not about laziness then. It's more
Right.
like just misplaced energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And psychologically, it can actually stem from perfectionism
Oh,
and the fear of not meeting these like sky-high standards we set for ourselves.
right.
And Perry actually, he admits to delaying work on the article that actually won him the award.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm starting to see the humor here. But how do we actually use this to our advantage?
That's where structured procrastination comes in. So Perry's idea is to leverage that urge to avoid tasks
Okay.
by tackling other useful but maybe less important things. So imagine you have a massive report due.
Right.
Instead of staring at it blankly,
Yeah.
you suddenly feel this urge to organize your files or finally clean your inbox.
Okay, so we're essentially tricking our brains into feeling productive while still delaying the big one.
Yes.
But is this really effective, or is it just a way to feel less guilty?
Well, Perry argues that it's about creating a hierarchy of tasks.
Okay.
Right? So that report that's looming at the top,
Mm-hmm.
but beneath it, there's all these smaller, more manageable things.
Yeah.
And by checking those off, it provides a sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
And this kind of builds momentum to tackle the harder stuff later on.
I see the logic, but task lists can be overwhelming in themselves.
Right.
Any tips on making this system actually work?
Well, Perry is a huge advocate for breaking down big tasks into smaller chunks.
Okay.
It makes them not only less intimidating,
Right.
but it allows for those mini victories along the way.
Okay.
And then there's the anti-task list.
Right.
This is where you consciously note what not to do while you're working.
So no social media or online shopping sprees
Exactly.
or getting lost in email chains.
Yes. Identifying and avoiding those procrastination triggers.
Right.
That's key to creating a more focused work environment. It's like setting boundaries for your attention.
But sometimes even boundaries aren't enough. Have you ever been stuck in a rut and needing that extra push?
Absolutely. And this is where Perry's suggestion to use music comes in.
Okay.
He believes it can be a powerful tool to shift our mood and energy levels for better focus.
Wait, so blasting my favorite playlist can actually make me more productive?
Think of it as creating a flow state
Okay.
where you're so absorbed in the task that time seems to fly by.
Right.
And Perry even gives specific song recommendations.
Oh, wow.
For example, he suggests Obla-di Obla-da for a cheerful start to your morning.
I never thought the Beatles could be my secret productivity weapon.
Right.
But let's be honest, sometimes even music can't compete with the internet.
Oh, the internet, a procrastinator's paradise and downfall all in one.
Yeah.
It's a treasure trove of distractions,
Yeah.
but it also allows us to scramble and get things done last minute.
Carrie calls it both a friend and a foe,
Mm-hmm.
which I find hilarious. It's so easy to get sucked into that digital vortex when we're supposed to be working on something else. Any advice on breaking free?
Well, Perry has a surprisingly practical tip,
Okay.
albeit amusing. Setting external deadlines.
Okay.
It could be something simple like needing a bathroom break or grabbing a snack.
So basically tricking ourselves into stepping away from the screen.
Exactly. He even suggests setting an alarm
Okay.
as a reminder to get back on track. It's all about bringing our focus back to the task at hand.
This is making me rethink my whole relationship with procrastination. But what about working with others? Could that help or hinder the process?
Well, Perry actually highlights the value of collaboration,
Okay.
especially with someone who has different work habits.
Okay.
He calls it finding an anti-procrastination buddy,
Okay.
someone whose non-procrastinating energy can be contagious.
So their productivity rubs off on you. I can see how that could be helpful, but also a bit intimidating.
True, it's a delicate balance.
Right.
Their energy can be motivating,
Yeah.
but it can also feel like you're constantly playing catch-up.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to find someone who challenges you in a positive way,
Right.
not someone who makes you feel inadequate.
That makes sense. It's about finding a partner who inspires you to step up your game without making you feel overwhelmed.
Right. And sometimes even when we do procrastinate, something curious happens.
You mean that feeling of relief when a dreaded task suddenly becomes irrelevant?
Yes.
Like the universe is rewarding us for putting it off?
Precisely. Perry calls it the vanishing task phenomenon.
Okay.
And it's almost as if procrastinators, they experience this more often because they tend to delay things until the last minute.
Right.
And sometimes in that delay, priorities shift.
Yeah.
And the task simply vanishes.
Okay, I have to admit, I have definitely benefited from that a few times.
Yeah?
But is it really just luck, or could there be something more intentional at play?
That's an excellent question. While luck might be a factor,
Right.
it could also be a sign of good prioritization.
Okay.
Maybe subconsciously we're already focusing on what truly matters and letting the less important things kind of fall away.
So maybe we're not just procrastinators, but accidental minimalists. But this whole procrastinating with purpose thing, how does that work exactly?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Perry suggests that we can deliberately delay tasks to observe how others handle them.
Okay.
It's a form of passive learning,
Right.
gathering information and insights before jumping in ourselves.
So instead of rushing into a project, I could observe how my colleagues approach it, learn from their mistakes, and then apply those lessons to my own work.
Exactly. It's like research and development,
Right.
but with procrastination as the driving force.
And this actually connects to a bigger theme Perry explores. Embracing our procrastinating selves.
Absolutely.
Instead of constantly beating ourselves up for putting things off, we should learn to work with it, not against it.
Precisely. Accepting procrastination as part of who we are, rather than a flaw to be eradicated.
Right.
And maybe even celebrating those achievements, even if they came about through unconventional means.
Because let's be real, sometimes those moments of brilliance hit when we least expect them.
Yes.
Like when we're scrambling to meet a deadline and suddenly have an epiphany we wouldn't have had if we started weeks earlier.
Yes. Those moments of productive panic can be surprisingly effective.
Right.
Perhaps our brains thrive under pressure. Or maybe there's a hidden benefit to procrastination we haven't fully grasped yet.
Now you've got me thinking. If procrastination can sometimes lead to these unexpected benefits, could it be a sign of adaptability? Like in this constantly changing world, those who can delay gratification, pivot quickly, and embrace the unexpected are actually better equipped to navigate the complexities of modern life.
That's a fascinating thought. It challenges the traditional view of procrastination as solely negative.
Right.
Maybe in some cases it's a sign of resilience and creative problem solving.
So maybe we procrastinators aren't so bad after all. But before we get too carried away with this newfound appreciation for procrastination,
Right.
we should acknowledge the potential downsides.
Absolutely. Unchecked procrastination can lead to missed deadlines, increased stress, and even guilt and inadequacy.
Right.
And while Perry offers insightful strategies for managing this tendency,
Right.
it's not a free pass to indulge endlessly.
It's about finding that balance between harnessing procrastination's power and ensuring we still meet our obligations and achieve our goals.
Exactly. And perhaps by understanding our own motivations and triggers, we can develop more effective strategies for managing procrastination and minimizing its negative impact.
So what stands out to you so far? What resonates with your own experiences? I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of overwhelm and the urge to just avoid.
Yeah.
But maybe instead of viewing procrastination as a personal failing,
Right.
we could reframe it as a form of self-preservation.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Could it be a way of pushing back against the constant demands of productivity
Yeah.
and reclaiming some control over our time and energy?
Exactly. It's like saying no to the never-ending to-do list
Yeah.
and yes to our own need for a breather,
Yeah.
for reflection, for
Yeah.
creative space.
And perhaps that's where procrastination's unexpected benefits come in. When we step back from a task, even if it's unintentional, we create the opportunity for new ideas or solutions to emerge. It's like letting our subconscious mind work on the problem in the background.
So instead of forcing a solution, we're giving ourselves the space for those aha moments to happen organically.
Right. And maybe that's why some of our most creative breakthroughs occur when we're least expecting them, like in the shower, or while taking a walk, or even in those moments of productive panic right before a deadline.
But doesn't all this procrastination eventually catch up to us?
Yeah.
Aren't there real consequences to putting things off?
Of course, there's a flip side to everything.
Oh.
Unchecked procrastination can lead to missed deadlines,
Yeah.
strained relationships, and a constant feeling of being behind.
Right.
It's important to acknowledge that.
So how do we strike that balance between harnessing procrastination's potential and avoiding its pitfalls? Is there a way to procrastinate responsibly?
I think the key lies in understanding our own patterns and motivations.
Okay.
What are our specific procrastination triggers? Is it fear, perfectionism, lack of clarity, or simply needing a break? Once we identify those triggers, we can start developing strategies to manage them.
So it's not about eliminating procrastination altogether,
Right.
but more about working with it.
Exactly.
Almost like training a mischievous pet.
Exactly. And remember, procrastination isn't always about laziness or avoidance. Sometimes it's a signal that something needs to change. Maybe the task itself needs to be reframed. Or perhaps we need to adjust our approach.
So maybe procrastination is less about what we're doing and more about why we're doing it, or rather why we're not doing it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding the underlying message our procrastination is trying to convey.
Right.
Maybe it's telling us we need a better system for managing our time or priorities. Or maybe it's a sign that we're not truly engaged with the task at hand.
This whole conversation is making me rethink the way I approach work in general. Maybe instead of viewing procrastination as the enemy, we could see it as a valuable tool, a compass,
Right.
even pointing us towards a more fulfilling and authentic way of working.
I love that analogy. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that procrastination, like any human behavior, can be understood and even harnessed for good.
So what are some practical ways we can start putting this into practice? How can we move from feeling overwhelmed and stuck to actually getting things done, even if it means embracing a little strategic procrastination along the way?
Well, one of the most effective strategies, as we discussed earlier, is breaking down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Right.
This not only makes the task less daunting,
Right.
but it also allows us to experience those small wins along the way,
Okay.
which can boost our motivation and keep us moving forward.
So instead of focusing on that giant, intimidating project looming over us,
Yeah.
we can shift our focus to those smaller steps that feel more achievable and less overwhelming.
Exactly. And another powerful technique is to schedule dedicated time for procrastination.
Wait, you're telling us to actually schedule time for procrastination? Isn't that counterintuitive?
It might seem that way, but hear me out.
Okay.
By consciously allocating time for those activities we tend to procrastinate with, whether it's browsing social media, watching videos, or simply daydreaming,
Right.
we can actually reduce the likelihood of those activities bleeding into our productive time.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to indulge in those distractions, but within clearly defined boundaries.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This way, when we're supposed to be working, we're less likely to be tempted by those distractions because we know we have dedicated time set aside for them later.
Right.
It's all about creating a sense of balance and control.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like acknowledging that these distractions are a part of our lives, but we don't have to let them control us. But what about those tasks that just seem impossible to start no matter how much we break them down or schedule our procrastination?
Yes, the dreaded blank page syndrome. For those tasks, sometimes the best approach is to simply start anywhere. Don't worry about perfection or even coherence at first. Just get something down on paper, even if it's just a stream of consciousness or a jumbled list of ideas.
So embracing that messy first draft, even if it feels completely chaotic.
Exactly. The key is to overcome that initial inertia and get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Once you have something to work with, even if it's imperfect, you can start shaping and refining it.
I can see how that would help to break through that initial resistance. It's like giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, to experiment and to iterate along the way.
Right. And remember, procrastination doesn't have to be a solitary endeavor. Don't be afraid to reach out to others for support, accountability, or simply a fresh perspective. Sometimes just talking through a problem with someone else can help us to see it in a new light and find a path forward.
So whether it's a colleague, a friend, a mentor, or even a therapist, connecting with others can provide that extra boost of motivation and support we need to overcome those procrastination hurdles.
Exactly. And remember, even if you slip up and fall back into old procrastination habits, don't beat yourself up about it.
Right.
It's all part of the process. Just acknowledge the setback, learn from it, and get back on track.
It's like that saying, progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe in those moments of procrastination, you'll stumble upon something unexpected and wonderful, a new hobby, a hidden talent, or simply a moment of quiet reflection that enriches your life in ways you never imagined.
Now that's a thought worth pondering. Maybe procrastination isn't the enemy after all, but rather a quirky, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately insightful guide on the journey of life.
I like that. It's about embracing the unexpected detours and learning to dance with the challenges along the way.
And who knows, maybe those detours will lead us to destinations we never even knew we were searching for. It seems like we've been conditioned to think of productivity as this linear, always-on pursuit. But maybe embracing a bit of that non-linear, seemingly unproductive time is actually what allows for true innovation and growth.
That's a really insightful point. Perhaps it's in those moments when we're not actively doing that our minds are free to wander, make connections, and generate those unexpected breakthroughs.
So maybe procrastination in its own roundabout way is actually a catalyst for creativity.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea, and it makes you wonder if those who are most comfortable with ambiguity, with not having all the answers right away, are the ones who are ultimately able to adapt and thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
It's like they're not afraid to wander off the beaten path to explore those uncharted territories where the truly novel ideas reside.
Exactly, and maybe that's a skill we could all benefit from cultivating. A willingness to embrace uncertainty, to let go of the need for constant control, and to trust that the answers will emerge in their own time.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective on procrastination. Instead of seeing it as this negative force to be constantly battled, maybe we can start to view it as a natural part of the creative process. A time for reflection, for incubation, for those unexpected sparks of insight to ignite.
I completely agree. It's about finding that sweet spot between action and inaction, between structure and flexibility, between pushing ourselves and allowing ourselves to simply be.
And maybe, just maybe, those moments of seeming unproductivity are actually the most fertile ground for our greatest ideas to take root and blossom.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of procrastination, what key takeaways do you think our listeners should walk away with?
Well, I think the biggest one is to stop beating ourselves up for procrastinating.
Yeah.
It's a human tendency, and
Yeah.
like any human tendency, it can be understood and even harnessed for good.
Absolutely. And remember, procrastination isn't always a bad thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's a sign that we need to reevaluate our priorities, adjust our approach, or simply give ourselves permission to rest and recharge.
And who knows, maybe those moments of procrastination will lead to some unexpected discoveries and insights along the way.
So the next time you find yourself procrastinating, instead of feeling guilty or frustrated, try to approach it with a sense of curiosity.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what is this procrastination trying to tell me? What can I learn from this?
Maybe it's a sign that you need to take a break. Or maybe it's a nudge to try a different approach. Or maybe it's just your mind's way of telling you to slow down and savor the journey.
Whatever the message, listen to it. Embrace your procrastinating self, experiment with different strategies, and see what works for you.
And remember, even if you don't conquer procrastination entirely, you can still learn to dance with it, to make it work for you, and to find the humor and the wisdom in those unexpected detours along the way.
Until next time, happy exploring, and maybe even a little happy procrastinating.